Welcome back to Roadmap, Auto Trader UK's product and tech podcast. Today, I'm going to be educated, if that's a loose word or not, on the art of research by three of our talented user researchers. I've got Hazel Bolton. Hello, Hazel.
Hi.
I've got Gabbie Johnson. Hello, Gabbie. And finally, and last but not least, I've got Natalie Methley. Hello, Natalie. Okay, so research. If you could start just to give us a little bit of a picture, because even though I do work quite close with you, I still really don't know what you do on a day-to-day basis. So it's a bit of a what to expect, what not to expect, if I could be a fly on the wall or follow you around on your pad for a day. I'm going to start with yourself, Hazel.
Sure. Yeah, great. User research at Auto Trader. It's a lot going on. So we've got, obviously, we've got our design team that we support. So we're doing design testing with our designers, and we're also doing kind of discovery up front. So that might be working with, we have our consumers and our retail customers. And so we could be putting surveys out, we could be running usability studies, or we could be working with retailers, getting in a room and doing a workshop with them, kind of learning about their processes, the tools that they use within their business that we need to know about to kind of really integrate well with how they work. So it's a little snapshot.
Yeah. And are you, I mean, I'm asking these questions, I don't know some of the answers, but do you tend to find that, I'm not asking questions, or you're in the office or you're out on the road a lot, or is it a balance of both?
I'd say that we're in the office the majority of the time, but we're definitely wanting to go out and do more field research. It's definitely one of the things that we want to focus on this year. It used to be more common that would happen before the pandemic, and then it kind of trickled off. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of face-to-face research happening for a big period of time. And in that time, our team has evolved massively. Not only our research team, but our design team as well. So now we've got this really good, solid group of people. We want to start embedding those like policies and like procedures of going out to see our customers again.
So this is serious, Pete. Please like and subscribe and share on LinkedIn. We're just going to go back to the podcast now. And how many researchers have we got now? Because I think at one time, Natalie, I think it was just yourself for a small period of time.
It was. So we've got 5 user researchers now, and we've got 1 research ops person. So the team dynamic has changed really like a huge amount since I joined the business. And I think that's just meant that our research capabilities have grown, and the types of research that we can do now has evolved so much, and we've got much wider spread of areas that we can support in the business.
Yeah. And do you work as like individuals, or do you work as a team?
I think it kind of depends what we're working on. So we'll be aligned to different product areas as researchers, but we do spend a lot of time together as well, like as a research team, and working with other research teams in the business as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important for us to have that time together as a group. So although the majority of our time we might spend within our product teams, there's a few sessions a week where we'll come together as a research team and really like give each other critique. So obviously we have a design team who do design crits, but we're starting to do research crits where we come with ideas or explore different methodologies together. We all have very different backgrounds of how we got into research as well. So I think there's always good, it doesn't matter what level you're at, there's always something that somebody else can offer that you might not have thought of yourself.
Cool. So if I'd just joined the organisation and said I was going to see the research, it's either, like to summarise, so some of the time together, sharing best practice, critiquing. Most of the time you're out with the product teams, which can be generally in the office, but in the future there'll be a lot more going out, whether it be seeing consumers in their habitat or going to retailers in their natural environment, and that's what you'd expect to see.
Yeah, it's a real mix, really. There is value in doing research in the office, especially on the consumer side. Obviously, people's natural habitat when they're looking to buy a car varies, but it's probably when they're at home or at work, so it's quite hard to get people at those stages, which is why we do a lot of remote research that people can still be in those settings, but we kind of speak to them when we're in the office. Obviously, with our retailers, we want to go and see them in their habitat because it's hard to understand how many jobs they actually have to do whilst we're asking them to do this one, what we might see as a simple task. They might have 3 people walking in on the forecourt or a different member of staff asking a question. So it's useful for us to see what else is going on in their environment that actually might make what we think is a simple task so much more complex.
Yeah. And is there anything we wouldn't like? So maybe you've been in another business as a researcher that if you came to Auto Trader, you wouldn't see?
Yeah. So I'd say you walk into Auto Trader, you don't see like personas pasted up on the wall. We definitely consider whether we should be creating personas, but we want to do it the right way. And the thing is, pretty much everybody is buying a car, so that's quite broad then. And we tend to think about it more in terms of the task to be done, rather than that changing or that we're targeting just a subset of the UK market. So to do a persona, to create personas would be a really massive task that would take a long time, and then potentially that's out of date anyway. I mean, we've just been through a massive period of change with digital retailing and people getting on board with that faster through COVID and dealerships being closed. But we're starting to see trends change again. So if you were to create personas 2 years ago, you'd need to redo them.
Yeah. And like Hazel said, we've got such a wide audience. So there are certain situations, like we work in finance. So if we're doing a product around finance, we might do a deep dive into that specific audience. But really, we need to think outside of that, because there's a lot of people who might be coming to us who want to purchase a car in finance for the first time ever, and they might have no idea. So having a persona that is focused around finance isn't helpful for that. So yeah, we do have to think about it really, really broadly.
Yeah. So this is, before we got into like talking about user research ages ago, when I met, I think it was yourself now, when I first met Nat and a previous colleague, I had in my mind that user research was those ones where you go to a room in a hotel somewhere and they make you drink coffee with a blindfold on and then decide which one you like the most. And then as you leave, you get like a check for like 20 quid. So is that like some sort of archaic thing, or is that a thing?
I don't know how you got signed up to do that, Pete. It sounds very weird.
Really?
I mean, it is research. It's probably just not the kind of research that we do.
Right.
Yeah. So those are more like product tests where they probably don't want you to be biased on the label of the product. So they'll blindfold you so that you can't see the label of the coffee or whatever it is that you're testing.
I don't know how I got roped into that, by the way.
To relate that to something that we might do would be like if we wanted to do a competitor study, we might not reveal that it's Auto Trader doing that competitor study.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah.
Cool. Okay. So if I wanted to be a researcher, not that you'd have me in your community, but if I did want to be, is there a particular like superpower that you believe a user researcher should possess, or many superpowers?
I think it's many superpowers. I don't think there's one specific thing that I could pick out. I think we were talking about this earlier, but like active listening skills, like being comfortable in an awkward silence, like don't fill the silence. It's when actually you get probably some of the most interesting things that your participants in research say is when you leave that gap, which is something that
I was going to say. That's not my forte. It's like if we went silent for a minute, I'd think of just something random to say.
Yeah, I think it's that genuine interest in people as well, wanting to understand their context, which you bring through that kind of the human side and everything that they're kind of juggling when they're interacting with your product, isn't it? Was saying earlier. But yeah, genuinely being interested in people, which a lot of people have, but sitting with that kind of discomfort as well. Sometimes you have to come across a bit like you don't know what you're doing or talking about.
It's like I can definitely play that card. Don't know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I'm not cool with uncomfortable silences. What about you, Gabbie? Is there any particular areas that you think resonate?
Yeah, I know we talk about empathy a lot in research, but for me, it is that kind of adding on to what Hazel said, because I think, you know, especially in our team, like we're an in-house team, we're not churning out research all day, every day. Like we spend a lot of time with our product teams, and that involves advocating for our users a lot. So we're in meetings a lot where we're thinking constantly all the time, like, what does this mean for our users? What impact will this have? What issues might they face? What will they love? Like, what will they hate? So you always have to be in the mindset of, what do our users think? What will they think about this? So yeah, that's obviously during the research, but whilst you're working all the time, just constantly looking out for, what impact will this have?
And what does, again, should know this is really where I'm starting to like form my mind. So, you know, when you say a good book, you have a beginning, a middle and end. Well, so I used to say when I went to school, like, what does a good piece of research look like? Is there a way that you could say, this is a good piece of research, this is a bad piece of research, or is it so nuanced?
I think there's different types of research. I would say a one-off piece of research, it on its own is helpful in one area, but really it's when you bring things together. So it's doing research at different stages. Like if we were to work with our product teams at the very beginning at product inception, really starting to get into the nitty-gritty of, is this idea viable? Do we think this is the right direction to go into, or do we need to pivot to like proof of concept testing? So we've got an idea, we want to see if that's the right direction to go through, all the way through to design testing once it's this physical thing. And then once you launch, it's monitoring it with data to see how it's performing, and you still might have to make changes at that point. So I think it's not necessarily one thing, it's the process as a whole that makes it really useful.
Yeah. I read something recently that was like, a good researcher always has more questions. Like you learn something and you want to question something else after that. So you're kind of always following on from, okay, so what does that mean? And what would that look like if we were to create something for them, for the users? So, yeah.
And when we finish, so say there's a product launch and we've got the data monitor in place, is that then research like put on the shelf as like an artifact, or is it always on in a way?
I think this is where there's different teams in the business who do different types of research. So we have our strategy and insights team who do more of the market research, that's very big, that sort of trickles down into the work that we do. But I guess once a product exists and it's out in the world, that might be when we hand over to more of our operationals teams, and we might help them set up feedback processes, like if they're going to be doing phone calls to our customers, or if there's emails going out, we can put surveys and feedback emails to make sure that we're getting that feedback loop constantly, and that will then feed back into the product team. So there might not be a researcher that still works on that product after it's launched if we feel like it's in a good position, but those teams will be set up in a place where they can continuously get feedback.
And is it product teams? I mean, Gabbie, you came from Voice of the Customer, was it?
Yeah.
Voice of the Customer. So is that another conduit in, like, from our sales force as well, that speak to customers on a daily basis?
Yeah. So Voice of the Customer was around analysing the feedback we'd get into the business. So that could be from any channel, social media, phone calls, emails, etc. Often looking at some of those feedback surveys that Nat mentioned as well. And we'd sort of analyse that and work with product teams in quite a similar way to build that feedback into product roadmaps. It sort of translates to research, really. It's still around getting feedback, but in a slightly different way. So in research, we're going out, asking users for feedback a lot more, rather than it coming in.
And is that, I mean, obviously, I'm just pivoting a little bit before I go back to like different teams of our traders. So you came in sort of from Voice of the Customer. What did you do before Voice of the Customer?
Before Voice of the Customer, well, that was a graduate job.
Was it?
So that before that was university.
Right.
Yeah. So straight in Auto Trader as a graduate in customer experience, Voice of the Customer.
Yeah, and then moved on into research. What about yourself, Nat? Have you always been a life researcher from the day you started, or have you done other?
I have, yes. So my degree that I did was in web development. It's a bit more on the techie side, but not too much in the techie side. And I realised whilst I was doing that degree that I could not code for a living. So I moved back more into the design and research side. And my first job out of uni was at a behavioural research agency. So I specialised in eye tracking and lots of interesting tech.
Cool. What about yourself, Hazel?
Yeah, not always been a researcher. My first route into digital, which I didn't know I wanted to do, but my first route in was as a QA.
Right.
And then I'd done English and anthropology as a degree. So I was leaving that QA job to move back up to Manchester and worked as a copywriter and content manager for quite a while. And then I was writing for UXers in the role that I was in. Became really, really interested in that. And yeah, joined an optimization agency and started that kind of research on the job, learning.
Interesting. And so you touched on it, sorry, Nat, about different disciplines that we work with within Autotrader, like market research, I can't remember that team's called right now, a bit jet lagged, and products. But typically, are there other teams that you all work with, like on a weekly basis?
Yeah, I think it's quite broad, to be honest with you. Our main team that we work with is design and products, but we work a lot with the developers. We work quite a lot with our compliance teams as well, like giving them evidence, especially if there's work that we're doing around finance. Obviously, we are FCA regulated, so sometimes they'll come to us with requests if they want us to do research on a specific thing to build up that evidence that actually it is the right thing to do for our users. We work a lot with our sales teams and RDS and our customer base supporting teams. So I'd say it is quite broad, the span that we work with. Yeah.
And in terms of, again, I don't know if this is skill set, mindset, tooling, but is there a difference between researching our consumer-facing propositions like the website, digital retailing, versus researching the other side of the two-sided marketplace, retailers? Is it very different, very similar? Well, what is the differences? Because I think yourself, Hazel, you're more on the what we call the trade side, and yourself, Nat, you're consumer. And what side do you tend to fall on?
Bang in the middle.
Bang on the middle.
Yeah.
So yeah, we should have redone the seats. So yeah, so start with it's probably your best place on the intersection. Does it feel like there's different things that you need to do depending if you've got a trade project or a consumer project?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this recently, actually, and like, is there a different skill set? And I think the skills you need are the same, but it's sort of how you approach it that's slightly different. So I was thinking, what do we do differently with our retailers? And I think for us, we have a retailer research panel who we work with, and it is with them about relationship building, which is not something we have to do so much on the consumer side. The consumer side, we recruit people in, I guess, based on whatever project we're doing, but usually somebody who's either bought a car in the last 6 months or is buying a car in the next 6, which is quite a lot of people probably fit into that bracket. Yeah. Whereas with the retailer panel, we're constantly having to keep building those relationships, speaking to them on a regular basis, keep them engaged with the research that we're doing. So I think it's more around that side rather than the skills that we use for the research.
There's a lot more stakeholders on the retailer side as well, but not only working with your product and design team, you're also working with the account managers of those customers and making sure they're kept in the loop. Sometimes we use them to build those relationships as well, so it can be a bit more tricky sometimes to get those set up and make sure everyone's kept up to date.
And does that feel the same, Hazel, in terms of, I know we've started doing some work with another customer set, like our partners, who we are technology partners that we share data with, etc. Is that another dimension again?
Yeah, I guess I think we have a shared purpose in some ways with our partners to get our retail customers. Those people are the customers for both of us. So we do have a shared purpose, but they're similar to our trade customers in that they're trying to run their own businesses. They might be quite time poor if they're in a small organisation. For example, somebody recently, he's running everything. So when we ask for time with him, we really have to show what value he's going to get from it as well. So they're giving them the motivation and incentivizing them to give us insights, to work with us to get insights, can be trickier. You're not kind of flashing up a voucher to thousands and thousands of people. You're getting quite specific about, I want your time. And this is what you will get from it as well.
That makes sense. So probably going now a bit more, in my mind, more abstract, but like, if then you were at a research conference, I don't know if these things exist. I've just been to a conference recently, hence I'm probably a little bit all over the show because I'm knackered after coming back. But is there like, if you were at a research conference, is there particular areas that you would make a beeline for? So, for example, I was at a automobile conference, but I was anything that was like AI, messaging, CRM capability, because there was vendors there. I went straight to those like desks to see what they were doing, rather than going looking at car washes and how I could, repair alloys. They didn't really give me anything. So it's the particular like areas that you'd go to first. I'm going to go to you, Gabbie, because I think we were chatting about this a little bit earlier.
Yeah, there's probably quite a few different areas, to be honest. But I think one of the main ones that I always come back to is accessibility. Part of the accessibility network or guild, can't remember which one it's called. So yeah, I always find it really insightful to hear about anything that's new in the industry, and we're always trying to improve how we do research, how we reach a more inclusive audience with that. So yeah, anything around accessibility just helps us to do research better.
Cool. And if anyone doesn't know what accessibility is, I think, Nat, you're on one of our first series podcasts all about accessibility. So you can tune into that. So that's a little bit of a plug. I'm getting quite good at this media thing, I think. But yeah, so accessibility. What about yourself, Nat? Is there a particular topic that isn't accessibility that you'd make there was a sign above it saying blah, 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 you'd go straight to?
Yeah, accessibility would have been one of them. But I think for me, research ops is an area that is quite interesting to us, especially understanding how other companies have set up their ops teams. And obviously we're a small research team that's supporting a much bigger design and product team. So having a really well-functioning ops team really supports us, enables us to do more and better research. So we're still in our infancy, really, of setting up that ops sort of side of the team. But it's definitely an area that I would like to learn more about and see how it's worked well and how it hasn't worked so well with other organisations.
Yeah. What about yourself, Hazel? Any topics?
Yeah, this topic I'm really interested in at the moment, which is atomic UX. And if you've heard of atomic design, it's the same thing in terms of you're taking your insight is made up of components. So you've got findings from multiple studies that you've done that click together as a component into an overall insight that you might be able to use in a lot of product decisions. So that's going right back around to something you were asking about earlier, which is, do the insights from our studies live on? Like, are they put on a shelf, or do you keep using them? And atomic UX would be kind of a database of your insights that you can access all the time and use in a much more dynamic way than a report that you're having to kind of, there's something in that report, but you have to read 10 pages to figure out where it is. Whereas this would be pulling them all out, and then when you've got things that are similar, you're able to link them together.
Right. See, now you've explained it, like the word atomic research, like it makes sense. When you said it, I'm like, I've got no idea where you're going with this.
Nuclear.
But I like the idea. So you've got a component here, and actually if you can see that thread joins, they join together, it's like, actually the power is much more tangible.
Yeah.
And it lives and grows as new things bolt on.
And so you can say, we want to try to experiment with, we've got an idea now of something that could work off the back of that. You try that, that doesn't work, you go back to the insights. So your insight isn't being thrown away with the experiment.
Yeah. And tooling wise, I mean, again, I know I was talking about car washes and alloy repairs at this one I just went to. But in terms of like tooling, so is there particular like tooling that is cutting edge or tooling that we want to invest in or are invested in? So what does tooling bring to research?
Yeah, so we obviously have tools that enable our designers to do more research. So we've got tools to like User Zoom that we use that, because we are a smaller team, allows people who aren't necessarily researchers to do research, especially that design testing level of things. As far as cool tooling, we invested in tools. We do have eye tracking, so we have some Tobii eye tracking glasses. We have our own labs in the office, which not a lot of people know. They do just like meeting rooms, but they are set up with some pretty cool tech in them. So we have a research facilitation room and an observer's room. So when we do bring consumers into the office, that is mainly where we do our research, and that's where we're going to be setting up our eye tracking. And that's quite a cool tool. Like I said, it is more my background of where I've worked previously, but it enables you to look a lot more at the design from a data perspective. So it just adds a lot more data to your qual research. So, for example, we used it a few years ago when we were redesigning our search listings, and we looked at the information hierarchy and the natural scanning patterns of our consumers. So we realised we'd made a design change that had actually interrupted that natural scanning pattern, and we'd made the sort of mental fatigue higher for our consumers because they were having to go up and down whilst they were trying to scroll, which is something that you just wouldn't get out of a normal user interview. It wasn't only when we were able to really look at that data, and this, I could bore you, I could do a whole podcast about this really, but
That sounds good.
it's really, really fascinating, the data that you can get from it. It's a lot more on the behavioural and psychology side of things, a lot of things that people aren't necessarily aware of. It's those unconscious behaviours that we do that you don't really talk about that much.
Yeah. And Gabbie, we were just mentioning before we were setting up around looking at where AI is starting to play a part in certain tooling. So have you seen any new tools maybe that we haven't invested in yet but that are quite interested on the market without obviously doing a shameless plug and then us getting sued or something like that?
Yeah, there's a few things that are just generally being talked about at the moment. Like AI is obviously a big topic of conversation. We're hearing more and more around like pretend users created by AI, which is a really interesting topic. I don't know that much about it yet. It seems a bit scary to create a person to like use your prototype or something that behaves like an actual human. We've been looking at tools at the moment. Some of them do things with AI to help you create tests without having to do that yourself, or sort of writing a research report for you. How much we would trust that, I don't know. Yeah. Obviously, it's a very new thing. We're used to, pulling all those findings ourselves and formulating an output. So it's interesting to see that in tools that we've looked at recently, that AI is playing into it a lot more.
Yeah, I think one of the areas that's been spoken about a lot more is obviously research analysis can be quite time consuming.
Yeah.
And I've seen quite a lot where AI has been quite helpful in like theming an analysis and just doing that like first step in your analysis so that then you can dig into it more if you want to. But yeah, it's not really something we've explored that much, but something we're keeping an eye on.
Yeah. And where do you think, I've got a frog in my throat at the moment. Excuse me. He's a proper frog, might be a toad. But where do you see, I mean, you just mentioned AI, where do you see sort of user research going as a discipline? I'm not talking just auto trade, just generally, is AI, or it's a bit of a buzzword in AI, but like what is the trajectory? Because obviously it feels like even in the last 6 months, and I know Gabbie, you've been out on sabbatical, things have changed again. So is there a particular trajectory that the discipline or not the market, but like the area is going and new trends coming out? Or is it you could roll back 10 years and it's just, not that it's the same, but it's just refining on the base concepts?
it's a really hard one to answer.
You've only got 30 seconds.
I think it's one where technology is definitely supporting research as a thing. Obviously, as research evolves, there's probably more need for user research to understand how people use that technology as well. But yeah, as AI, we've obviously talked about, I see that more supporting researchers than replacing researchers.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely from like articles I've read and other podcasts I've listened to. It definitely feels like that is the place that we'd like to get to. Otherwise, we'd be out of jobs. But yeah,
I think there's a caution in how you use those tools and how much you rely on them, and cut out the researcher who, we were saying earlier, brings the human to the table.
Yeah.
A real person with all of their messy life to deal with, that we're trying to understand and cater for. And if you were to take away real users and take away the researcher who kind of knows how to ask those open-ended questions and sit down with follow-up questions, sit down with the user and make them comfortable, like, yeah, there's definitely a caution. So I think I am seeing some people say it was 10 years ago, there was more weight put behind the researcher and their skill with people to sit down and kind of really get the whole picture. Whereas lots of automated research now is kind of losing some of that understanding, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's turning into numbers again, and yeah, being narrow in your questioning is very kind of,
it's hard to bring out the barrier.
Yeah. Is there anything you're seeing particularly, or you saw within your 6 months away that when you came back felt a little bit different? Unless you were doing research on your sabbatical.
I was not doing research on my sabbatical. I don't know. That's a really hard question. I haven't noticed anything drastic yet, but whenever we attend conferences or talks, there's always something new. There's always a new buzzword, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's something new soon.
Yeah. I was just thinking that the timing of you going away and come back was probably design ops at AT, where we've started to really not quite get it, but understand that there may be some real power in that if we get it right. Because previously, I think it was just as you were going off, that's when we started to open that particular door and have a look in. So cool. All right. I know you, two of you, or all three, have got another session coming up, and we started a little bit late. So big thanks to Hazel, Gabbie, and Natalie. Like always, if you'd like to know more, please ping people on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'd be happy to chat. For the listeners and viewers, thanks again for tuning in. And remember, please like and subscribe on YouTube and hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. And follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And that's us done. Catch you soon. Laters.
cheers.